As Shanice is getting set up, I'll do some remarks. I'm so excited. We're hosting our second annual virtual symposium, but our sixth annual symposium overall. So we're so excited to be highlighting student research across various majors and departments in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So thank you so much for attending and being here. I would like to share a quick overview of of how we'll be hosting our events today. So each presenter will present for either 5 or 10 minutes, and that was up to their preference. So they'll present 5 or 10 minutes long. And then after that, we'll do Q&A session for 5 minutes as well. For the Q&A session, we'd like all folks who would like to ask a question to the presenter to add it to the Q&A box at the bottom. You'll also notice that you have a chat box at the bottom. Please hold any questions from the chat, and please make sure you put the questions in the Q&A box. However, if you'd like to give kudos to the presenters or say nice things about them, please add them in. So the chat are for nice kudos, affirmations, remarks. Q&A box is designated for questions when we get to the Q&A component of our presentations. So that's how each of the presenters will go through that same process for each presenters. I also like to share that we opportunity drawing for folks, particularly students, who submit questions through the Q&A box. And so we'll, at the end of the event, we'll download all the reports and identify the students who submitted to the Q&A box for the Q&A session, and you'll have an opportunity to win an Amazon gift card. So hopefully that entices students who are here today to ask questions. And because these are ASI funds, it is for students only. So faculty, staff, administrators, we love you. We appreciate you being here. Please still ask questions, but the gift card can only be given to the students as they are from ASI funds. So with that, I think I've taken care of all of the logistics, introduction business. And so I'm going to pass it over to Shanice Watson. She's a current graduate student in our political science department here in HSS, and she'll be talking about the outlet of the Black community. So give her a virtual round of applause. Thanks, Shanice.
Hi, everybody. So welcome to #Black Twitter, an outlet for the Black community. In the following slides, I will highlight the way Black Twitter acts as a modern day counter-public, using hashtags for counter narratives and pedagogy development. As a reference, a counter-public is a place where subordinate groups invent and circulate interpretations of their interests, identities, and need. And this term was coined by Nancy Fraser. Okay, and before getting started, I wanted to pose a caveat. This is a quick presentation. I only have 5 minutes to explain the Black experience in Twitter, in modern day Twitter. I wanted to make sure we knew that the Black community is not a monolith, right? So as we listen to this presentation, I hope you can listen with curiosity rather than fear to capture truly what Black Twitter is. Okay. So #Black Twitter. So the rise of Black Twitter showed that there was more to understand when it came to the internet connectedness, right? Black Twitter is a modern day counterpublic that allows Black people to speak critically about Black issues in an informal, private, public way, and feel heard and supported by those who want to listen. Similar to that of a barbershop, a Black barbershop, or a Black sorority. Black Twitter uses hashtags to amplify different occurrences in the mainstream media that the mainstream media tends to ignore and create an outlet for healthy acknowledgement and healing. So my first hashtag was #IfTheyGunned-Me-Down. So this grew out of frustration at the media's reliance on menacing stereotypes and photos of the Black community. Black Twitter showed users pictures of themselves that the media would use versus their family would use if they were gunned down by the police, to show the true representation of the Black community. So Black Twitter advocates for the imperfect victim, which rejects the perfect victim schema that was deemed necessary in the civil rights movement. So a few examples of this, right, is like Sandra Bland. Well, of course, she was pulled over for a traffic violation, and Alton Scott, he was running away from his arresting officer. These occurrences are not punishable, should not be punishable by death or trial by media. By advocating for the imperfect victim, Black Twitter rejects respectability politics and protects the true victim. Our next hashtag is hashtag say her name. This is a hashtag that Black Twitter created to make space to address the gender specific ways that cis and trans women and girls face violence. In the mix of the Black community's outrage of police murders, Black women and girls experience were left with little to no media attention. Black Twitter seeks to amplify these voices by using Say Her Name and resisting to let their stories go unheard. Also, Black Twitter's goal with Say Her Name was not to erase that of the male victims, but to show the state violence, show how state violence was shown and inflicted in the space and expand the mainstream conceptions of gender. Okay. Yeah, so those hashtags, those are heavy, right? Those are a lot of things that the Black community faced. I skimmed over a few of them, but I want to be clear, right? While it is true that the media and other news outlets sometimes paint the Black community as strong and resilient, and we are, I also want to create space for a side that doesn't get as much coverage as it should, and that's Black joy. So this Black Joy tweet was by Shantae J. She's an activist, she's a writer, and it says, "We can actively trace the spatial and temporal control of Black expression from slavery and colonialism through to today. This is why the act of joy is resistance. And as we use our physical bodies to protest, march, and demand change, we must also use them to experience the pleasure of joy." So this tweet was posted a little after the George Floyd, the police murder of George Floyd. She goes on to say that to cope with white supremacy, we must be joyous and rebellious. Thus, Twitter created Black Boy Joy and Black Girl Joy to start the conversation of Black people being regularly happy, right? So that's all to say, we deserve justice and joy, and one does not have to be at the expense of the other. Black Twitter has been able to start the conversation of the inner workings of the Black community. It creates a refuge to help tackle tough issues, and it also gives allies a way of knowing the focus of the community conversations and where to position themselves in those conversations. Of course, Black Twitter does have its limitations, but I think for a second we should take a look at what 140 characters and a hashtag has done for the Black community. So thank you. I have a few memes that I would like to show, and if you have any questions, feel free.
Thank you, Shanice. Would you like to explain the memes, or it's up to you, whatever you prefer?
Yeah, so I did put some of the hashtags that I mentioned. So this is on the top left. I'm assuming that it's your top left as well. It's hashtag if they gunned me down, right? So the first would be how the media would portray these two Black men, and the bottom would be how their families would portray them, right? Graduating, having fun, having a good time versus however you interpret the first one, right? The second one, or the one in the middle, is growing up Black. So this is what I meant when we have shared experiences, but we are not a monolith, right? So it says, the crazy thing about growing up Black is that I didn't grow up with any of you all, but we have the same experiences, and that's culture, right? And to the top right is hashtag say her name. And I really suggest, if you haven't seen this documentary, it's on HBO and it's also on YouTube. I definitely think you should check it out. And then there's a couple funny ones in between, but I'm gonna go to the middle to the right is hashtag Black Joy. So it's just a Black girl enjoying herself, right? You can see the joyousness in her face. And the other three are just like pretty funny ones. The one to the right is COVID related. Then the other one is talking about your crush, and then the other one is a school. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything.
Thank you, Shanice. Thanks so much for bringing light to this important topic. We do have a question, so I'll read it out. The question is, do you think Black Twitter will grow beyond what it is now?
I guess I think I think that question can go a multitude of ways, right? Because if you mean, will it grow outside of Twitter? I think it has, right? I think Black Twitter specifically has created protests, created connections to people that met in real life who met on Twitter, who were then met in real life, right? So can it go bigger than that? I would hope so. I hope it brings light to all of these injustices and hopefully brings them to a stop, to be honest.
Yes, thank you so much, Shanice. And I'm just going to read off the few chat comments. Quote, "We deserve justice and joy," end quote. Yes, thank you for sharing your important research. That came from Dr. Graham. College advisor, excellent job, Shanice. Julianne, such an important topic. Thanks so much, Shanice. So thank you again. We appreciate you bringing light, and yes, so there continues, and hopefully we get to a point where there is justice and joy. So thanks, Shanice. Thank you for having us. I'm going to put you back as an attendee, and I'm going to bring the next presenter in.
Sounds good.
Hi. Thanks, Shanice. Set the great tone for our symposium for today. I just added our next presenter, Varvara. Feel free to share your screen when you're ready. I see you're already doing that. As you're setting up, I'll do a quick intro. Varvara is an undergraduate student in psychology, and they'll be talking about, does he think I'm attractive? Women's tolerance of belittling behavior in male-female interaction. So thanks so much for being with us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, my name is Gulina, and I will be presenting my research today. The research is called, "Does he think I'm attractive? Women's tolerance of belittling behavior in male-female interactions." So women experience a lot of mistreatment in their lifetime. As many as 1 in 3 women will experience either physical or sexual abuse. And what is interesting, though, is that psychological abuse tends to have a more negative effect on women even than physical abuse. So women will have higher PTSD symptoms from psychological aggression or from verbal aggression. And the purpose of this research is to test whether women are less likely to recognize belittling behavior and denigrating behavior when they are primed with men's preferences for passive women. And the focus of the study, as I said, focuses on belittlement. It is a lighter version of disrespect, or I would say a more subtle version of disrespect. I couldn't find much information on it in academic literature. And so I decided to sort of redefine it. And as denigration, this would be as dismissing of the other person's words and opinions, especially through the use of humor. So any verbal or kind of physical behavior that shows the other person that their opinion is not important, and that they do not hold as much weight as the other person does in conversation, etc. I framed this research through self-objectification theory, or the male gaze, and that is basically the act of perceiving women as sexual objects versus them having value, real personal value. And so unfortunately, a lot of women internalize the male gaze, and then they self-objectify themselves in order to appear attractive or in order to have some type of approval from the men. And I extended that definition into moral and traditional values. So anything that really falls into the good woman schema. The good woman schema is anything that a woman thinks she needs to fit into in order to be labeled an attractive woman, in order to be labeled a good woman, and in order to be approved by society. Self-silencing, which is another theoretical framework that I'm using, is the act of silencing your emotions or even anything that you really want to say in order to conform to whether it's the other person or societal norms. There's a lot of research on this, and it's very detrimental to women. Women, it predicts very high rates of depression in them, but it also predicts a lot of physical ailments as well. So it seems to be something that women experience. They feel that they have to do, yet internally they feel anger, they feel resentment, while on the outside they appear to be appeasing. And one of the questions is, I tend to judge myself by how I think other people see me. That's really how a lot of women who self-silence see themselves. The research question is, could the need to remain attractive and desirable be why women tolerate disrespect from men? And the hypotheses are these: women who are presented with information about men's preferences for passive women, which is the male gaze, will be less likely to recognize belittlement than the women who do not. And part of her passivity is caused by the woman's desire to remain attractive in his eyes. So we used a mixed methods approach, which was both quantitative and qualitative data. We also used psychological scales and interviews. Originally, before COVID-19, this was an in-lab experiment. And so we had two groups who would come in. One of the groups will receive a male gaze prime, which is a fact sheet about all the things that men find attractive in females. And they use things such as passivity and submissiveness. And then the participants would be belittled by the male. And then we would see if they would speak up for themselves. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that due to COVID. So we created an online experiment, and they would respond to hypothetical scenarios with the male. And the scenarios included everything from very light disrespect, which is like interrupting someone, to very high disrespect, which was like touching someone inappropriately, etc. We also developed a belittlement scale. And then we also, I created an attraction towards abuse scale, which really looks at behaviors such as control or jealousy, things of that nature that some women find attractive, because in our culture, unfortunately, a lot of the behaviors that are associated with passion and love are actually very highly associated with abusive behaviors. So I really also wanted to look at how women would respond to that scale. We had 130 participants from Cal State Fullerton, and this is the breakdown of all the ethnicities. These are some of the materials we used. Like I said, the silencing the self scale, the assertiveness scale, as well as the male gaze prime. Everything was used for the online study as well. And so our findings currently are preliminary. However, there are some things that we found so far. And that is women who were primed with information on men's preferences for passive women were less likely to recognize belittling behavior. So that hypothesis did turn out to be true. The importance of being seen as attractive and desirable was also strongly connected to attraction towards abuse. And low self-esteem predicted attraction towards abuse. So the less women thought of herself, the more likely that she saw certain abusive behaviors as attractive. So basically, these findings indicate that when women are primed with information that women are more attractive when they're submissive or passive, that they're more likely, that they're less likely to recognize certain behaviors as belittling. And that is a problem, because if they cannot recognize it, they do not really know how to deal with it. And really, this kind of sheds light on how belittlement plays into the larger issue of domestic violence, because it's a more subtle version of abuse. It's on a continuum. And so a lot of women do not really know how they get into abusive relationships or just harmful relationships in general, because it may be they're not really able to recognize the early signs. They may normalize certain things. And so with this research, I really want to inform educational programs for women so that they're able to be informed about those subtle dynamics and processes, and are able to predict what will happen and hopefully kind of take a different route with their relationships. And here's a quote that says, when we understand people, when we understand the trigger of actions, we least inflict pain on ourselves and others. The aim of this research really is to empower women and to give them a voice, a sense of hope, and really a sense of courage again, for them to feel empowered into believing that they really have control over who they get into a relationship with. And so it's not all automatic. These are some of the references. And this is my contact information in case you'd like to get in touch with me or my mentor, Dr. Carrie Carmody. I'd also like to say thank you to the McNair program for sponsoring this project, as well as to my mentor for supporting me, and finally to the Department of Psychology at Cal State Fullerton. Thank you for allowing me to share these important findings.
As someone who identifies as a woman, I've experienced it myself. I've seen it amongst other Women Plus communities. So I very much appreciate, again, this really important research. I do want to, we have a few minutes left. Just a quick reminder that we'll be entering a Q&A part. So if you have a question for Varvara, feel free to add it to the Q&A option at the very bottom, and we'll get your question answered. So we have about 2 more minutes. So feel free to add it there. And if you have comments, feel free to add that to the chat. So comments or chat, Q&A box are your questions that you have for the presenters. Ola, was anything surprising in your findings that you found out through your research?
Yes, there was one thing. I believe it was, depression didn't really predict attraction towards, abusive behaviors. So we thought that was pretty interesting, because we kind of think that there at least will be like a correlation. So that's one of the things. The other thing, obviously, we want to do some regression analysis and see what else we can find. So these were just like very preliminary first findings. I'm sure maybe something else will come up, but so far it would be just that, I think.
That's great. So it sounds like you want to continue on this research topic.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I really want to publish as well. That would be kind of a dream.
Yes, it's so important. It's so, so important, especially within the humanities and social sciences. I love when folks conduct some great research and then we get it out there for the world to see. And this is the first starting point in the symposium. So yes, I hope you are able to publish. And it sounds like you have some great mentors to help you through that process as well.
Sure.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any questions coming through the Q&A. I'm seeing some comments come through. Awesome. Thank you. Great job. Really useful research to help with intervention strategies. Absolutely. So with that, would you like to have anything else you'd like to share, Barbara?
Oh, did you say we have a couple of minutes left?
We're about time, but yeah, feel free to share if you have something else you'd like to.
I think that's it for now, but thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you, especially in this virtual format. We love that we could still continue to highlight student research. So I'm going to put you back as an attendee and we'll bring in the next person.
Sounds good.
All right, so moving on with our symposium, we have a packed schedule. So I'm going to go to our next presenter. Sergio, feel free to share your screen if you'd like. I'll do some introductions for Sergio. So we have Sergio Torres. He's an undergraduate student, liberal studies major, and he'll be talking today about the Santa Ana Mural Project. So Sergio, I will pass it over to you whenever you're ready.
Sorry, my mic was off.
You're good.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Sergio Torres. I'm a liberal studies major. This project is part of my thematic theme. I'm very excited to have the liberal studies department and Professor Angeles Sancho Velasquez guided me in my research. So my research involves cataloging murals in my hometown of Santa Ana. I grew up in Santa Ana. It's a beautiful city, and I always was fascinated by all the murals all over Santa Ana. I got a camera, I got in my car, and I cruised around the city and took pictures. But most notably, I got to connect with the community artists, and I got to get a feel for the art scene in Santa Ana, which I didn't know was so layered and nuanced. I grew up with murals. Oh, I'm sorry. I grew up with murals. I've seen these kind of murals in and around different neighborhoods, and I was very inspired by their messages. Um, so, like, if you see these murals, they show pictures of people succeeding. They show culture. They show nature. So I was very fascinated by how these murals impact communities. Um, so most people in my community of Orange County, they don't learn about Mexican or Chicano history through history books. They learn about it. They learn about it through art murals. Art is not just in museums. Where I grew up in Santana, people never go to museums to appreciate art, but there are physical cultural legacies painted on walls, not just in Santana, but all over Southern California. It's important to leave a legacy of cultural heritage through physical artifacts that leave intangible attributes of a culture and a society. Murals in Southern California and in my hometown of Santana project culture, and has been very influential in my life. And this is a very powerful poem. That this is a very a rough translation, but it's very impactful, and it kind of highlights the power of a mural to break barriers, to bring attention to important issues, or to just try to connect people in the community. So this poem, it says, new interwoven visions and its paths re-highlights the flowers and the colors of each pueblo or village so that it may let life flourish. And that's a very powerful statement, um, because most murals, they look like this in Santana right now. The other murals that I showed, it's a beautiful mural. It's not defaced, but community-based murals are incredible for the city. However, murals are subject to being tagged and damaged over time. Many, if not all, of these communities are low-income communities, and these murals are a way to have hope. And it's sad that these murals are defaced, and it kind of brings a question to why aren't these murals being restored or taken care of? Um, so these murals are beautiful, and they project culture, unity. If you can see the different flags of Latino America, it's a beautiful thing. People that look like me are on these murals, and it's very inspiring to me. But it's sad, they're defaced. A lot of people don't understand how powerful these messages can be. Um, so that's one of the things I found, and in my research, that there should be a more of a conversation about how these murals can be protected and preserved, so for future communities. Because yeah, if you take a look at that, it's a beautiful mural, but it just looks really ugly with that on the side right there. Um, and this is a very powerful picture. A lot of people don't know that a lot of murals in Santana are painted after tragedies happened. Santa Ana is a beautiful city, but there's a long-standing history of gang violence. This cross in this picture is a makeshift shrine for candles that marks the place of a person who was killed. Artists like Solis, Joey, who I interviewed, they helped guide Santa Ana youth in painting these murals to help heal the affected communities. And unfortunately, gang culture is a reality in Santana. But these kind of walls help to, help to heal, to bring attention to important issues like this, and um, also to commemorate the loss of someone's life. Um, but there's also contemporary artists and art in Santana, um, and it's a mix of old and new. If you can see here, there's lowrider cars. The typical, we have unofficial mascot of Santana, the parrot, and our very beautiful water tower that's denoted by in a lot of pictures. Um, But we also have hard-hitting contemporary issues like the death of Vanessa Marquez. Um, and this picture hits close to home, literally, because I live like across the street from this, down the street from this. And I was very surprised and happy and proud that this mural was put up. Um, but it also raised a question of murals, new murals being erected in the city, which is kind of problematic at the moment with Santa Ana's laws. Um, so there's a lot of murals that talk about contemporary issues like the death of Kobe Bryant, as well as this very interesting. The original painting was just of Cesar Chavez, but someone I guess defaced it, or they put a mask, a pompadour, and sunglasses on Mr. Chavez, and this was around the time of COVID. So it's very interesting, and it's very layered. I believe that Mexican culture being silenced, or it's very nuanced. It's up to your interpretation, but it's very interesting to me how art on walls can reflect how people are feeling. Um, so this is one example of contemporary issues in Santana right now on walls, and it's a little close up of it, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement that was going on. This was very prevalent in Santa Ana. The Black Lives Matter movement was a very big issue. There was a big protest, and it's another outlet, art for contemporary issues for people to vent and bring attention to important issues. This is one of my favorite murals. It's probably one of the biggest until recent times. It's very nice. This is in the downtown area of Santa Ana. This was a project by students. It's a part of a school, NASA, something like that. So it's a very powerful thing in Santa Ana. Also, there's powerful paintings on roach coaches, which is like it's kind of hard to explain, but they sell, like milk and fruit and stuff, so people don't have to go to the stores and neighborhoods. And this is just another way of beautifying the area. A lot of the times, these things are defaced and tagged, so people made murals on them, which is very beautiful and very, very beautiful. And these are one of my favorites, some of my favorite murals, which is some of the oldest, painted in 1991 by Valley High School students, which is for me, the epitome of raza and culture and Mexican and Chicano culture in Santa Ana. So I always love sharing these pictures. Um, so I'll speed it up real quick. So to me, murals, especially in Santana, they tell the story of the people who live there, and it allows people to reflect on their past and also get connected with their cultures. So I'd like to end it here and say thank the HNSS symposium for letting me share my research. Thank you.
Yay, Sergio, thank you. I love your research topic. I love how you said that the murals tell a story of people who live there. It's very much about the community and how you can protect and preserve these beautiful murals that are across Santa Ana and various cities like across the nation. So thank you. I love seeing research topics like yours. So I appreciate that, Sergio.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it's a quick reminder, we do have a Q&A component. We have a few minutes for that. If you have a question for Sergio, please feel free to add it to the Q&A box, and so we'll get that answered for you. I don't know if you can see it, Sergio. I can read it out loud. So thank you, Sergio, for sharing the great work. The question is, the city of Santana is currently experiencing extensive gentrification. Aside from being defaced, how have these murals, if at all, been affected by the process of gentrification? In other words, have any of these murals been painted over for the sake of modernization? Thank you. Great question.
Yes, great question. And yeah, yes and no. The murals have been affected directly and indirectly. I believe that through my research, I've felt the disconnection between the city of Santana and artists. Um, and some of it has to do with gentrification in the downtown areas. I didn't talk about some of the other research or research that I'm doing is that I'm kind of talking about and then starting that conversation about murals and gentrification and the power of art. So I feel like that there is in a way, I feel like for sure that murals have been affected by gentrification, whether it's directly or indirectly.
Do you see pros and cons of that?
For sure,
I
I
think of
feel
4th
like
Street, like 4th
yeah,
Street comes to mind, like
yeah,
immediately.
of course, and that's the kind of issue that I'm kind of getting at is that when people talk about art, they talk about or they think about downtown, the downtown area, and that's good because the art scene has grown tremendously. There's a lot of culture there. There's a lot of revenue. But at the same time, the murals outside of the downtown area are not being talked about, and in turn murals are very easily put up in downtown, but it's almost a hassle to put them up outside of the downtown area, which is another layer to art in Santana.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sergio. And thank you, Joseph, for asking that question. I'm
Thank you.
seeing some comments in the chat. Thank you, Sergio. Community expression is so needed. Absolutely. This is really good historical information on murals. I didn't know until now that there are stories behind them. Good job. So thank you for bringing that awareness. Thanks so much for sharing so many murals in your community. Such a powerful way to use art. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Snaps.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions, y'all? This is good. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank my professor, Angeles Sancho Velasquez, for guiding me in my research, and also HNSS for letting me disseminate my research to all my peers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sergio. We appreciate you. All right, good job. Thank you. I wish one of the things I do miss about in person is like hearing a hand clap and like the positive affirmation. I won't hurt people's ears. So yes, we'll do our hand claps like this. All right, Sergio, I'm going to put you back as an attendee and I'll put the next presenter in. Great job.
Thank you.
All right, so we have our next presenter with us today. Tanya, feel free to share your screen if you have a presentation. I'll do some quick introductions. Today we have Tanya Somesh. She's an undergraduate student, liberal studies major, a minor in sociology. And today Tanya's going to be talking about better education, better life. So I'll pass it over to you, Tanya. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vaidehi Tanya Somesh, and as Dr. Moreno mentioned, my presentation will be on better education, better life. So society is constantly innovating new ways to have a longer, more prosperous lifestyle that can be drinking turmeric milk every morning, drinking green juice, working out 3 times a day. This presentation will be focusing on the correlation between education and longevity. Please note that the importance of education and the development of skills is deemed invaluable for children's development and overall progress. However, the issue of disagreement arises over the significance education has when correlated to longevity. So what is longevity? Longevity is defined as the duration of human life. The ability to live a long, prosperous life is based on a combination of around 25% genetic factors and 75% non-genetic factors, which is wonderful to hear as someone who has a medical family history background that's like longer than some of my economics textbooks. Some non-genetic factors include income and wealth, environment quality, subjective well-being, job satisfaction, job attainment, and numerous other factors that contribute to having a long and healthy lifestyle. Education has a correlation with the numerous factors I mentioned in the previous slide. And according to the Economic and Social Research Center, an individual who is content with their educational accomplishments and is able to incorporate their education as part of their personal identity have satisfactory mental health, positive self-worth, and they can benefit psychologically. A comprehensive education is also associated with increased political interest and high levels of social trust. Social trust just determines the amount of confidence an individual has in their government or community. So if an individual has high social trust, it can lead to higher life satisfaction and longer longevity. And an individual with a lower social trust, it has actually been associated with higher suicide rates. Education is also one of the most accurate predictors of physical health. It surpasses even age, race, and gender. And a study done by Miriam White in the year 2016 shared that a higher educated individual is, quote, most likely to visit their physician on time and track down a salad for lunch, unquote, than a person with a lower education. And that's because individuals with higher education have the resources and availability to make better health decisions that's not always offered to someone with lower education and less resources, which is why there's a strong positive association between education and total life expectancy. The ability to live in an environmentally clean neighborhood is also dependent on education. A study conducted by the Economic and Social Research Council, as well as a separate study conducted by the Organization of Economic Cooperation, shared that areas with low education rates have higher susceptibility to fine particle pollution, meaning that there are more pollutants in their air than a region that would have a higher educational level. Individuals living in low educated regions also lack proper medical care, and they have high exposure to other pollutants besides air. This can be due to like rodent problems and just a general unhygienic neighborhood. And these combinations lead to high amounts of diseases and a low life quality. It should come as no surprise that the higher educated you are, the more income you're able to generate. So the relationship between education and income is summarized by the human capital theory. The theory states, higher investments in education yield higher productivity, which is gratified by high earnings. Based on 2019 data from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, workers over the age of 25 with no high school diploma had the lowest median weekly income and the highest unemployment rate, compared to the individuals with a doctoral degree had the highest median weekly income, which was triple than those who had no high school diploma. So high school diploma individuals, they were making around $500 a week, whereas individuals with a doctoral degree were making over $1,800 a week, which is more than triple the amount. The more educated an individual is, the better job quality they have. Job quality, defined by Sarah Hassler, is the association between an individual's job and their quality of life or opportunities. So Sarah Hassler was concerned with two different things: the correlation between higher education and job happiness, as well as the correlation between higher education and job quality. She defined job happiness as positive relations with coworkers and personal productivity, whereas job quality included wage, hours, personal freedom, workplace environment, and it was just general job quality. So her findings found out that there is a positive weak correlation between higher educated individuals and their job happiness, which if you're lower educated, good job, because that means that there's a couple of other factors that can lead to a better job happiness. However, she found that there's a very positive, strong correlation between higher educated individuals and job quality, meaning that the higher educated you are, the more higher job quality you'll be able to receive. As mentioned earlier, education has a direct role on physical and mental health. Data from Kaiser Permanente's survey in their Northern California region shared that 69% of adults with a college education said their health was very good or excellent, compared to 32% of those without a high school diploma. The report also shared that patients with a higher education had low risk from diabetes, and all patients higher or low education had received the same access to diabetes care. So both high and low educated patients, they received the same exact treatment. However, lower educated patients had a higher risk of more extreme diabetes symptoms and death. A similar trend can be seen with nations that have universal health care, taking out the price tag of medical treatment. In the United Kingdom, lower educated individuals have higher illnesses rates. And individuals with low education, they often have increased challenges in accessing healthcare, as they primarily reside in low-income neighborhoods that have limited primary care providers. So why does it matter? We've proven that longevity and education are interconnected, but what effect does that have on society? Well, as college students, it's wonderful to hear for us because we're most likely going to be living a longer life. However, those with a lower educational attainment have a lower life quality and shorter lifestyles. And the sad fact is that the income and social gap play a huge role in educational attainment. Since the start of the 1980s, overall income has decreased for 90% of the American lower class, with the majority of income gains going to the top 1% of the population. So the rich are getting richer, they're getting higher educated, they're living longer lives, whereas the poor, they're getting poorer, they're living shorter lives, and they're not able to obtain as much education. In 2020, there was a score given to all 50 states, and these scores were based on the educational attainment of individuals 25 and older. In Massachusetts, 84% of their population had some sort of college degree, whereas in Mississippi, only 21.01% of their population had some sort of college degree, which should come as no surprise that Mississippi also has one of the worst healthcare systems in the nations, and Mississippi also lacks the proper infrastructure to support other educational resources and programs. So children living in a stressful, struggling household or neighborhoods have a negative effect on their education. Their stress and other conditions can also have biological harms and cause youth to participate in unhealthy behaviors, including smoking and violence. Children in lower income families are more likely to obtain lower test results, drop out of high school or college, and they're more likely to work a minimum wage job and have higher health problems, which causes them to stay in the same low life quality cycle. As mentioned earlier, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So what can we do to help stop this? What can we do to enact change? Lowering the educational achievement gap can help provide higher life quality for all individuals. The implementation of Common Core aims to provide equal education nationwide. Common Core is a set of high-quality academic standards in mathematics and English language arts. The mission statement of Common Core states that it was created to ensure that all students graduate from high school with skills and knowledge necessary to succeed in college, career, and life, regardless of where they live. So hopefully, as Common Core progresses, the goal is for them to have the same score as Mississippi had 21% and Massachusetts has 84%. We want it to become an equal score throughout the United States. Another solution would be to utilize the neighborhood effect. Studies have shown higher income neighborhoods are associated with higher educational levels for students, while neighborhoods with few to no professional workers are associated with having an increased dropout rate. Several school districts have begun the practice of busing students from lower income areas to higher income regions. So in a few years, we'll be able to see if the results of economic mixing has provided a better educational experience for all students throughout. Another solution could be to implement higher quality early childcare and education programs before kindergarten and preschool. According to the CDC, early childhood education programs help support students' physical and mental health, and it was shown to reduce chronic absence throughout their entire school experience. These programs were able to keep students focused, engaged, and enthusiastic throughout their school day. So this approach has not been studied as an entire whole solution, but individual parts of the solution has been studied, and it has been proven to decrease the educational opportunity gap as entire. Benjamin Franklin once said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So people with fewer years of education have shorter longevity and lower life quality. Better education truly does lead to a better lifestyle. Investing in knowledge provides increased life quality, which is the best interest anyone could get in any investment. And I would now like to open it up for any questions, comments, or concerns.
Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate this. Obviously, we're working higher education. We value education for many folks, especially in our college, who are predominantly first-generation students, Pell eligible students, folks of color, where they're the first that really are making a difference, not just for themselves, their family, their community, etc. So I appreciate you highlighting the importance of education. But I will like to turn to the audience and see if folks have a question. Again, anyone can submit a question. We encourage you to by using the Q&A box that's located at the very bottom. Looks like we have a question that came through. So Tanya, can you expand on the relation between higher education and lower risk of diabetes? How is the risk of diabetes lower with those who have higher ed versus lower education?
Yes, so this is actually, it's kind of due to like a whole bunch of other factors on the cause and effect side. One of the main reasons is that usually individuals who have a lower education, they have hourly wages. So let's say if they are feeling sick, if they're feeling unwell, it is more difficult for them to take time off work to obtain a doctor's appointment, or they don't go to the doctor until like the condition is very extreme. They kind of push it off until the very end. And on top of that, a lot of, as someone who's like higher educated, you have the ability, because school does not just teach you like your major. As a liberal studies major, I've learned about X, Y, and Z, but I've also learned how to research different topics, and I've learned how to Google things properly, and I've learned how to calculate my own research. So let's say if a higher educated individual gets diagnosed with diabetes, they're able to do their own research on what type of medication works for them. They're able to go to the doctor's office more often. They're able to research like the benefits and the consequences of different medical treatments that they have, which in turn leads to their diabetes not leading to death, or which in turn leads to like lower symptoms. And it's a whole bunch of other factors, but in general, the lower education you have, the more at risk you are for different diseases and health issues. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Tanya, for your answer. I think you kind of mentioned it throughout, but the intersectionality of identities, did that come up in your research?
Most definitely. One of the first slides that I mentioned, it's that individuals who are able to incorporate their educational attainment with personal identity, they had higher life satisfaction in general, and they had higher levels of social trust. So that kind of leads to like depression and suicide rates in general. If an individual has low levels of social trust, and if they're not confident with their education, it leads to higher rates of depression and higher rates of suicide. Whereas someone who is confident in their education and they're confident and they're content with their attainment that they've able to do, they're a little bit, and they're more like content overall with their lifestyle. Mental health is a very complex issue, and I'm just making a very, very broad generalization. There's so many other factors that go into it, but generally the higher educated you are, the less at risk you are for suicide and depression.
Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate that. You're right. It is very complex.
For any of the quotes and any information provide, like any quotes and everything, I have that as well. It's that this slide is prettier to look at.
Perfect. Thank you, Tanya. I think that's it. I think we're at time. So appreciate you sharing your research and different elements and, like you said, the complexities of this topic in general. So thank you. I'm going to put you back as a panelist. A great job. And then after this, we're going to take a few-minute break, and then we're going to do the poster session. So poster session starts at 3 o'clock. So we have a few minutes before that time happens. So feel free to stick around for that part as well. Thanks.